Ready.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now in order. And, we're going to begin our initial dialogue on the capital improvement plan. I think this is about my second go around with this. And I've seen these things go really, really well. Last year it went really, really well. And I've seen them go really, really badly. My first go around as chair, and I ran this meeting, it went really, really badly. And it went really, really badly because we did not do a very deep dive during the work sessions. So I'm hoping that you guys will go very deep in 2.5 hours. What do you mean? Oh, Microsoft. I think I don't know if we got. There we go. Yeah. So hopefully you guys will have lots of good questions to ask. In between now and when we meet in January, you'll have a dialogue going back and forth between the city manager and the budget team. So that when we meet in January, we're not building the budget. I remember one meeting, my first year as chair, many years ago. We ended up leaving around 2 o'clock because we're actually building the budget. So let's do a deep dive today. Let's get good questions back and forth between the city manager and the budget people. And let's be pretty much ready after, of course, we've gotten input from the public to move this thing along. With that, I'm going to toss you the ball, sir.
All right, sir. Thank you. I just want to say that I don't want to be up until 2 o'clock in the morning building anything. So that'd be nice. I just want to thank you all for this opportunity. This being my first budget that I'm responsible for submitting. It's been a lot of work. There's still a lot of work to be done. Of course, we start with the CIP as that process, as the process begins, and then we delve deeper into making the rest of the sausage before it is presented to council. We have been working hard already. This is going to be an interesting budget cycle for us. There are a great number of priorities, as you all well know. Council having adopted their strategic outcome areas in September, identifying 9 areas and a commitment to JEDI, therefore 10, and how to balance all those things. That has been the charge that I've been given. It's the charge that I've accepted. And our goal is to make sure that this budget that is presented to council is reflective of those 10 priorities. The effort thus far has been to make sure that we can firm up what is in the CIP, make room for new items. We have made significant room for new items. We've addressed some critical things that have been floating more conceptually in years past. We've pretty much tried to attack some of those things specifically in this 5-year proposal that you have in front of you. And then, of course, we'll do the harder work of making sure that the FY25 budget does balance, because that is my obligation to bring forward a balanced budget. Our budget director is at home ill. She's pushing through. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to run you through the normal formal presentation. I'll join her at different times, and then as Chair Mitchell has said, we're ready to go as deep as you want to go.
And one thing we want to do, if you've got a question, go ahead and interrupt and ask the question. Don't wait till the end to ask questions.
Good evening. Thank you all. I apologize for not being able to be there in person. I also apologize for my voice, but hopefully we will make it through. And so with that, if someone could please bring up the PowerPoint, that would be great. Thank you. So as we mentioned, this is a draft CIP. It's a draft for the next 5 years, for 25 through 29. Next slide, please. So tonight we're going to just do a little bit of a review from a lot of you to talk about what is a capital project, what is the capital improvement program, what is the budget, why do we do a 5-year CIP, and how does the process work. Next slide, please. So what is a capital project? The special characteristics of that is basically the project has to have an essential public purpose. It usually has a long useful life, which is at least 5 years, typically much longer than that, usually non-recurring and non-operational, and generally speaking, more than $50,000. Next slide, please. So some examples from the last few capital project plans, as you all are well versed with the Kindlewood development. Last year was the first year we actually added some dedicated dollars to the CIP for our climate action plan to address those initiatives. We added $1 million last year, and this 5-year plan adds $1 million over the next for all 5 of the next year. We also are replacing some traffic signal infrastructure, in addition to replacing the CHS roof replacement. Next slide, please. So the capital budget is a multi-year plan. We do a 5-year plan, and it forecasts spending and revenues for all anticipated capital projects. So while we formally do a 5-year plan, we have had discussions with council about actually sort of doing an informal 10-year plan to kind of pencil out some of the bigger things that we have in mind. And we have not done a lot of work on that yet, but we are going to be discussing that with council. It also should build on the comprehensive plan, and it should also address the repair and maintenance of existing infrastructure and the development of new facilities as well. Next slide, please. So what is the difference between an operating and a capital budget? Basically, the operating budget has a shorter duration. That's basically 1 year. And then anything that's not spent is that appropriation goes away or falls to the fund balance, as opposed to the capital budget where those budgets carry forward from year to year until the project is actually complete. Additionally, the operating budget covers the day-to-day expenses, pens, pencils, personnel, things like that, whereas the capital budget includes large investments, building sidewalks, or some of the other projects that I mentioned. Next slide, please. So why do we do 5 years? We hope that this 5-year plan provides a framework that involves our citizens in defining the future of the community. It should also reflect the priorities of council and the city overall. It should determine a long-term cost of new growth, and it also can help encourage regional cooperation on joint projects, such as with the county and EPA. Next slide, please. So basically, a well-planned CIP ensures that major expenditures are aligned with community expectations, the anticipated growth, all while making sure that it also remains within our financial capabilities. So next slide, please. So what did the process look like this year? We heard loud and clear from our departments last year that they spent a lot of time submitting new requests to us, and they either didn't make it in or they fell by the wayside. So we were a little bit more intentional with new requests this year. We started in August. We had departments submit those new requests, and we had them submit very high-level basic information. The result of that was the file that I sent out, I believe came out earlier yesterday or today. And those submissions were all reviewed. It went to the budget team reviewed them, as well as the deputy city managers reviewed them with their departments as well. And then we evaluated those as a budget team and came up with a draft that you have before you. So the next steps are basically through November and January. We will present this to you all for your feedback. The city manager will take all of that under consideration, and then that will go into what will be his formally presented proposed budget, which will be presented to council in March. And then council will take that and do as they wish with it, and they will formally adopt the budget in April. Next slide, please. So some of the criteria that we use when we're looking at this, and some of the things we asked departments to look at when they were submitting projects, was there a legal mandate, something that we had to do that was required by law, a regulation, a court mandate, or some other liability? Was there a public health and safety issue present? Did this project eliminate or prevent an existing hazard? Was it something that came out of the city council or city manager's strategic work plan? Does it help further those goals? And then finally, does this project help meet the goals of the city's current comprehensive plan? Next slide, please. Additionally, we looked at environmental sustainability, the things that we added last year for the climate action plan. Does this help? Does the particular project help further those goals and commitments? We looked at the infrastructure investment. Does this help protect or preserve the city's current infrastructure? And then finally, what is the impact on the city's operational finances and ability to generate revenue? Will the project have a positive, neutral, or negative impact on the city's finances? Next slide, please. Sorry, I got to take a sip of water. So some of the areas that were given special consideration, did the project tie to other existing or proposed projects? Was there demonstrated public support for the project? Are we leveraging or have the ability to leverage other outside funding, such as grants or otherwise? Will the project be done in partnership with one or more other organizations? And does the project increase the level of service provided by the city? Next slide, please. So one of the most important things when we look at the CIP is we need to make sure that whatever we're planning on spending actually balances to the available revenues. As you know, we have a policy that no less than 3% of our general fund budget goes to the CIP as a transfer as cash. We also finance a lot of the projects by selling bonds. And then we also work in partnership with the schools who've contributed money, as well as the Stribling Avenue project, which was a unique opportunity to leverage some other funding, outside funding as well. Next slide, please. So the city, as you know, has a AAA bond rating, and every year when we talk about the budget and the CIP, we talk about our debt capacity and our ability to sell bonds. At one point, a lot of the conversation was that we were bumping up against our capacity. But in the last few years, as you know, we've continued to have a very strong recovery from COVID, as well as a very strong real estate market, which has contributed to the growth of our general fund budget, making our capacity not so much the issue as affordability. So even though we have the capacity to issue the bonds, we still have to pay them back. And all of this hinges on our financial stability. So with our bond rating, as a AAA bond rating, the city is fortunate enough to be one of only 125 cities nationwide that maintains a AAA bond rating from both Moody's and S&P. We're also only one of 10 Virginia cities and towns who maintain that distinction. Next slide, please. The bond rating every year is an independent review of really the entire city operation. The rating agencies review everything from our financials to our plans, such as the CIP, and they take all of that into review and make a determination on our creditworthiness and also our ability to repay our debt. So again, we've been AAA bond rated from Standard & Poor's since 1964 and Moody's since 1973. This bond rating allows us to borrow funds at the lowest possible cost, and also helps maintain, by the fact that we're paying a lower interest rate, we are able to have more dollars available for projects. It's also very attractive in attracting economic development prospects. And essentially, we do this rating every year. We've gotten in so that we are basically selling bonds every year, and every bond issue has to be separately rated. So this becomes an annual review. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of the current draft that you have before you. As you'll note, the revenues in every year do match the anticipated expenditures. If we were to look at just in terms of the total dollars over the 5-year plan, and if we were to speak about budgeting in terms of our priorities, you would see that affordable housing is coming in first, transportation and access is coming in second, and education is coming in third. Next slide, please. So we'll take just a little bit of a little deeper dive in each of these categories. Here you will see that some of these accounts, especially in this education category, are recurring types of accounts that are in the CIP each year. The lump sum to schools is basically money that is put in and helps address sort of the upfit of different parts of the building. The priority improvements is an account that was established several years ago, and those dollars go through actually a school CIP committee process in which the schools decide on a priority project each year. So some of those projects have included like Clark School. They redid a wing. I think there was a library that was redone at one of the elementary schools. But that's sort of a process that they go through independently. The HVAC replacement is just exactly what it says. The roof replacement is a rather large project that will be ongoing. Interestingly enough, that project is being funded and will be built in such a way that we hope we will be able to secure other financing mechanisms to make that a solar roof, which would also help advance our climate action initiatives.
I had a quick question, Chrissy.
Sure.
On the just out of curiosity, on the lump sum to schools, what are we trying to get to? I know there's about $4 million in the fund right now of unspent expenditure. What is there a goal? Like goal bucket size?
I don't think there's a specific goal. I think what they would tell you is Mike Goddard, who is our project manager, who handles those projects, they have a lengthy project list that all of those dollars are allocated. Sometimes they have to save more than another. But I think if you ask schools and Mike, they probably tell you they could spend what they have and more. I think there has been a delay because if you recall, during COVID, we basically shut down the CIP, for lack of a better word, not knowing what the impacts were going to be. And so we suspended spending for almost a year. So some of that got delayed, but I think they're getting ramped back up. And I would not anticipate that we would see that larger balance going forward.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
So,
Sure.
Separate question. We talked a little bit when we met about Walker and what was happening with the money for Walker. We've got a representative on his school CIP board with us, and he'd probably be interested in understanding what happened to the money. This was the money for Walker, the $17 million.
So I'll take that with Chrissy. So the $17 million was the grant that we received. We had applied for $7 million. That was part of the arrangement that council had approved in setting up Buford for the reconfiguration. We were successful in getting $17 million. That $17 million has not been allocated in the CIP because council still has a decision to make in regards to how those funds are to be used. Since they came in excess of what we approved the Buford project to move forward on, there's some reconciliation of that particular matter. There has been indication from the school that they would like us to use that money for Walker. But that is also the conversation that needs to happen with council. So upon them making that determination, then we would deploy it into the CIP.
Yeah, and I would just say as a very practical matter, those funds will be applied to Buford because that's what the grant is for. And that will be $17 million less bonds that we would sell for Buford, but that would be available for Walker or other projects as council deems necessary.
Is there more needed for Buford? Is there more needed for Buford on top of that 17 if that were to be transferred?
Not that we have
Or
heard.
not for Buford, for
Yeah, not that we have heard, and hopefully not.
Cool.
91 is a lot. But, you know, it's possible.
But as to for the pre-K Walker reconfiguration, do we have an idea of what the cost would be for that?
Chrissy, I think we had a projection, but that's dated, right?
I think currently it's like 25 to 27, but I think that's a very rough estimate because there's no official design or anything.
Right. And by the time
25 to 27 million, I'm sorry.
and by the time we would determine a project year, you're going to add escalation for a couple of years at least.
Yeah.
Any more questions on this slide? I will say one other point here is that you'll see there are several roof replacements. As you are all aware, our school buildings are older buildings, and this was an attempt to start to build in a program for roof replacements so that we can get those replaced as they are aging and are at that point. So you do see several roof replacements here. And if nobody has any questions, we can move on to the next slide. So facilities, capital projects, again, some of these are things you see every year. The lump sum to facilities is very similar to the lump sum to schools. Again, they have sort of a multi-year laid out plan of things they're going to spend that on. The city and school solar PV program, you'll see there's no funding in the out years. And that is because we are hoping that we will be able to secure other funding through tax credits or some of the other performance agreements. If those don't pan out, those dollars may reappear in the CIP, but for now we're hopeful we can find a different resource. The General District Court, couple things here. As you know, we are sharing that project with the county. We've already made the big city contribution to that. However, the county did come back and there were some changes, I believe, that an additional hearing room was required. And so that this $410,000 is for that hearing room. And then the original cost estimate did not include furniture and fixtures that may be needed, and that's basically what that 201 in 26 is intended to address. Again, the Ravenna Solid Waste Authority baler and baling facility, that is simply the city's contribution to that project. That is actually a Ravenna Solid Waste project. And then the HVAC contingency fund, as we know, a lot of our HVAC systems are aging, and there is a large parts delay and also just timing for replacement. So these contingency funds were put in place, I believe, starting last year as an attempt to, if we had an emergency and we needed to rent a large HVAC system until we could actually find a permanent replacement, these funds would give us the opportunity to address that.
Looks like you skipped the $1 million for the climate action initiatives.
I'm sorry, I passed over that. What was your question?
Oh, yeah, what is it? What are the climate action initiatives for $1 million next 5 years?
So that was something that we started last year. Originally last year, we put in $1 million. At the time, we thought we were applying for a grant that would require a $500,000 grant match. Unfortunately, we weren't successful with that grant. However, there are multiple initiatives and a work plan that Ms. Rittervold has put together for those dollars. And Sam or Steven, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, so I don't have the specific action initiatives, but that work plan is the document that they're required to produce on an annual basis. We do have an active work plan that is posted on the website, on their page. Those are the projects that they're working on work plans across the entire organization at this moment. So we're going to make sure that their work plan follows the fiscal year going forward. So they'll be doing a new work plan for effective July 1, which this money would be a part of. There's still some work to be done in this space of making sure that we identify clearly what are the things that we're tackling versus what are the things that people outside the organization, the city organization, are tackling. The $1 million is just intended to be available for that work as well as grants match, because they are trying to go after as many grants as possible.
Flexibility with that? I mean,
Yeah, that's why it's labeled climate action initiatives, so that it's not to earmark it specifically to restrict their use. It'll be up to them. They have to. I'll just say
who is the they you're talking
that is the climate team led by Crystal Rittervold. At the last council meeting, I also announced that forming an Office of Sustainability, pulling them out of Public Works. That is to elevate the priority that climate action is for this city and this organization, so that they then will be responsible for reporting directly to me. So that gives me the ability to ask more questions, more like what you're asking right now.
Exciting. Will those be bondable dollars or cash flow?
Well, they'll be both. There'll be a combination of things. It'll be grant match. It'll be bondable because some of the projects will be for our buildings and school buildings. And then we'll have other resources that'll be available for them to do their specific projects.
So what happens if we end up not spending $1 million? Does that just kind of roll into the next year? Or does it?
It does roll.
Yeah, it does roll.
Yeah.
But I will also say with that, I mean, you've seen before that even though these accounts roll over, we do look at that. And even though in many years, like sidewalks and other things, people have said, oh, you've reduced your funding. Why aren't you funding this? It's because we do go back and look at the available budgets and decide, hey, do we really need this $1 million, or are we still sitting on enough to make it through this year? So we do look at that. We try not to build up enormously big budgets just for the sake of having the budget.
Lost it for a second. Yeah. Let me also add that one of my priorities with the CIP specifically is to work the CIP. We haven't really done a great job of working what is there. We have all this money allocated for all these years, and when some money rolls over, there should be a reason why it's rolling over. It should not be rolling over just because we didn't spend it. And I would like to make sure that in our process, we're trying to figure out why is it that it's not. If we're holding it because we need this $300,000 to go with next year's $700,000, that's different. I can accept that. I can understand that. But if we're not spending it, then we need to think about that a little more, because there's something that we're sacrificing not doing by letting it sit.
Yeah, and part of what we did with this process as well is we sent out a listing of all the existing projects, and basically those are all the projects that you would see in the Budget Explorer. And we did ask for everybody to provide a status update and a spend rate on that. And we will be reviewing that and making some recommendations to council. Anything else on this slide? If not, we can move on. So, public safety. Couple things on here. Replacement of fire and EMS apparatus. Well, let me just say, there are a lot of things on this page that some of the criteria we discussed earlier maybe don't necessarily meet strictly those definitions, meaning that there's several things on here that you could look at and one would say, number one, these look like operating expenses. They're also recurring. And some of them are less than $50,000. What's going on here? So, couple things. the fire trucks and the ambulances are very expensive, and we do bond those. So that is why they end up in the CIP, and that's based on a replacement schedule. The bypass fire station, again, much like the circuit court, we added some additional money here for furniture and fixtures when that's done. And then also the fire department will be repurposing the existing bypass fire station. And so there's $100,000 in 26 that you see that will be used for that. The everything from the police mobile data terminals all the way down to the end of the list through the turnout gear. All of these things are essentially recurring types of things. In many cases, such as the breathing apparatus and the turnout gear, those are new items this year, but they're also a very expensive capital layout. They have extended useful life. I don't recall exactly, but I think one is like 7 or 9 years and one is like 10 years. And so they're due to be replaced. So, for example, the turnout gear, that's why you see the bigger number in 25, because we do need to replace a big batch. And then the annual amount that's here will help them get on a cycle so that they're able to replace them in smaller batches so that we're not having to put out big dollars every year for that. And that's similar to what we're doing with the radio replacements as well, and the mobile data terminals as well.
So what are we doing about
questions here?
what are we doing about the fire station by McIntyre?
Now we can go to the next slide.
Can you hear us?
Are you there? We lost you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear
Any
us?
questions on this slide?
Yeah, McIntyre, the fire station by McIntyre. The 250. What are we doing about that?
Do you mean the existing building?
Yeah, because we are raised. Well, aren't we going to raise that building?
No.
And build a new building?
No, we're
We
not.
changed our mind?
We're building a new building next to it.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, where's the money for that?
We already have that. It's already funded.
It was in last year's
Yeah, it
CIP,
was last
the
year.
last two CIPs.
Cool.
I had a question
That's
on.
what the 100.
That 100 is for the existing building,
Okay.
so that we can repurpose its use.
A question on looking at the Budget Explorer. There was about 1.6 million for radio system upgrades. Is that separate from having radio replacements, or what is that money for? It was, I think, to switch to the new system, the 800 megahertz system.
Yeah, so that was a joint joint project with the county and UVA, and those dollars were budgeted as our share of the project. The project has, I believe, come to an end, but I have not actually seen a final closeout, but that is one that we probably, we need to do some due diligence, and that's probably ready to be closed out.
Okay, so that is spent. It's not unspent.
If it's available budget, it's not spent, but we have been paying our share. It's been a multi-year project. I'm going to say at least 5 years. I might be wrong about that, but we have been paying our share along the way.
Okay.
Any other questions here? Not, we can move along.
Thanks.
So transportation and access, a lot of recurring projects that you've seen before here. A few things to note: the traffic signal infrastructure is a larger item. That's basically for the stoplights and those large masts that are at the intersection. They are expensive to replace and long overdue, and so we do have a replacement schedule. And we are beginning, as we had an assessment done, and many of those were beginning to fail. And so we have added dollars to replace those.
So, question on that. I remember, this time a year ago, I guess, you guys had just finished that assessment, and like 3 of them were absolutely critical and like need to be replaced immediately, and we budgeted like $4 million for this fiscal year for those. And I look at the spend, and there's no spend. So are those traffic lights about to fail? Is there, what's the holdup? If it was so urgent.
So I need, maybe Steven or Sam have some more detail. I believe it's a supply issue. I think we're ready to do the work. We just can't get the equipment, I think, but I might be wrong about that. We could certainly follow up if no one knows.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. I'm Stephen Hicks. I'm the interim deputy city manager for operations. It is still a supply chain issue as well as contractors getting them on board, but they are being focused on, they're prioritizing how we go about doing it. But you'll see most of these projects that have been in the queue because of supply chain, we're going to be catching up here. So hopefully by this time next year, I know it's difficult to say that, a lot of these questions will no longer be around. But we're having a hard time, real hard time. And if you know any contractors out there that want to do work with the city, we're open for that too. But we'll get more information to you.
Thanks.
Any other questions on this slide?
Oh, I got lots of questions on this slide. That was just for that line item. So
Come hang out with me.
So walking into this meeting with Lyle, he raised the point that it feels like every year we ask the exact same questions. New sidewalks, they're $100,000 a year now. It was interesting reading the request because it said we put $100,000 a year in almost by tradition, and that's not enough to meaningfully fund new sidewalks. Actually, when I first got on the commission, we funded new sidewalks at $400,000 a year. And then, we were told, oh, well, there's so much money in the account that, we can't spend it all, and so we're reducing the funding rate. And, I also noted in the request, they say all the money that's in the account is tied to projects that are happening and that are tied to grant money or whatever. Why are we still funding it like such a meager amount?
You want to? Well, the funding issues, I will share with you all. We can throw as much money as we want at these sidewalk projects, but the economy and just the supply chain can't keep up with it. I just want everyone to know that. We have one concrete company that works for us because it's hard to get anyone else to work for us. Second, there have been proposals for us to establish a concrete crew that would do it. Mm-hmm. Currently, we have 20 vacancies in the utility department just for labor, equipment operator workers, skilled trade workers, and just as much in public works. So we can't even hire employees to do the work, much less contractors. So the issue is not the funding, and we're doing a great job funding. The issue is there's just not capacity both internally to be able to do it and contractors. I mean, it's still so what we're doing, to answer your question, we're trying to group all of the projects we possibly can to make an attractive package and put it out there. Now with that, and these are going to be more of the larger contractors, it's probably going to cost about 20 or 30% more too with that cost. But I will share with you, based on my assessment and work with staff, you could throw $2 million in this budget, and I can't guarantee if we're going to spend it. I mean, we just can't. It's hard to find people to work in general. That's all I can share with you all.
And what I'll add is, if you remember, that's exactly what I said to you last year. That's what's hard about this for me, because that doesn't feel like a good enough answer. But it's the facts. We're still working through what can we do internally, what can we do differently internally. So we've had one of the concerns was about procurement. Could we package these projects, because they're all small projects? Could we package them all together? And since Stephen's been here, he's been trying to figure that out. I think it is my expectation that we will have a better answer for you next time. But this is just to show you that we are still working on it, and I knew that you would have these questions. I told him to be ready for this question. Yep. Because I knew that was going to be something that we really don't have a better answer for. I said to you last year, don't give me more money because I can't spend it. It's still the same statement.
So if Mickey's feeling better, your 4 predecessors also told me the exact same thing. And I'll say the thing I say every year, which is that, you know, I'm relying on you guys to fix the problem, the backlog, and get, you know, the ball moving again. But at the end of the day, at some point we will have caught up, hopefully.
Right.
And we will have either been putting money into that pot, and you could say, oh, well, great, we have all this money that we can now spend on a whole new batch of sidewalk projects. Or we will have not been putting money into the pot, and we will have an empty pot and have to come back and say, well, like, we've only been putting 100,000 a year in, you know, are we supposed to change that now? And so my recommendation, as always, is to just put money in the pot, right? It's bondable. We're not issuing the bonds until we need it. But we're you know, allocating it so that when we're ready, the money is there so we can build the things we want to see. Because everyone seems to agree that that's what we want to have, right?
And I just want to share that. I think all of us, especially our employees, would love to do as much work as we can for the community members. I just don't want anyone to get disappointed or have false expectations that because we have this money that we should be able to be doing something. It's just the environment we're in, it's just not going to happen as much. And we're just not the only locality. And we have some of the brightest folks working for us to figure it out. It's just can't get contractors. Can't even hire a good skilled labor anymore. So we're going to do our best.
Thanks.
You said you had a.
Yeah,
bunch of
was there
things
more?
to keep going. Let's get it, let's keep going.
Sure. Stribling, is that on track or same situation, or is that different? It's a bigger project and not so much of an issue.
The Stribling project, it is. We hired a consultant firm, engineer firm. They're coming up with multiple options to find out which is the most practical and feasible solution. And we're given the options based on just a very basic safety improvement, providing sidewalks, or the Cadillac that ultimately is like a typical subdivision design road that has all the curb and gutter, the sidewalks, and all the other amenities. So we're anticipating, they've been out there, they've already done some assessments, but in February, March timeframe, we're about ready to roll out some of our options.
So where on the road does the work begin and where does it end on Stripling? I mean, does it go all the way or?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
the entire stretch.
But the sidewalk, depending on the least resistant route from a cost standpoint, sidewalk may be going back and forth to maximize the existing. Yes.
Right. It won't be both.
But we're going to share the ultimate one way, but it's going to not, I mean, on one side, but ultimately it's going to cost a lot more. Because of utility relocation.
You'll be able to see it.
Yes.
So we made a presentation to the Fry Springs neighborhood at Oktoberfest and shared that vision for them to understand it, since they're very keenly aware of the problem that
What was the
is there.
feedback?
That they're excited about the idea of seeing options. And of course, yes. But in this whole setting expectations, that's a real priority for us. Stephen made it clear that to get the version that we know that everybody will most enjoy is going to be more than what we have there. It's going to be very expensive, and that's one sidewalk project that we're talking about that could be upwards of $10 million. It is a complicated roadway, and it has many conflicts along it.
Just so people also know, just the cost of money, just the consultant to come up with concepts, and this concept design is going to cost us around $400,000. I mean, this is everything's
And that's no
expensive.
sidewalk.
That's separate from the 4.2 estimate
Yeah.
that we.
It comes out of
Well,
the
this is
number.
just concept, not even the engineering per se.
Yeah.
I mean, 30%, but not enough to go out to build it.
So Fontaine Streetscape, is that new money that had not previously been projected that we need to fill a budget shortfall, or because that's a smart scale project, right?
No, that's 750. If you remember last year in my presentation to you as well, I'll share with you the challenges that we've had with VDOT managing our portfolio. One of the items that came out of that was VDOT pushed back on what we had allowed that project to balloon to, and they basically handed us $750,000 in expenses and said, we're not covering that, you have to. So that's what that is. It's to cover that gap that exists in the project that did not exist at the prior.
Okay. And with those big budget smart scale projects, are we going to see any break ground?
Of course, we'll see.
Yeah,
year?
we will. Yeah, we need to get through, well, maybe, not this year.
Yeah. this year's almost over.
But next year,
Oh,
we're being
yeah,
optimistic.
sure, yeah.
But we're getting, a lot of them are in the right-of-way stage, where we're acquiring right-of-way, pushing through and stuff. But
Yeah.
the program is definitely on the right path of just all of our projects, on delivering projects on time. But VDOT's been very, very helpful. We have a great partnership with them moving forward.
Which ones are still active? Because I feel like some of them went away and we kept some, right? Those are the smart scale
Yeah.
Railroad
projects.
to West Main.
We did, yeah, we reorganized. We'd have to get you that
Yeah,
list.
it's probably a good list. We'll be here
Okay.
a long time.
I didn't realize it was that long. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have,
East High, Fontaine, Emmett, Phase 1, 2, Barracks, Emmett, Cherry
Right.
Ridge.
yeah.
Okay. So
But there
those
were a
all still-
variety of changes that we can get that report to you, though.
Yeah.
We can get that to you.
Just curious. So.
We have a page and a half of projects, so we'll send that around.
Well, I was under the impression a lot more just went away. So.
No. There's not a lot. That wouldn't be a word I would use to describe it. There's some, but definitely not a lot that went away. The goal was to try to get it where we could manage it and to be able to get them to move forward. There were some that we even combined because it didn't necessarily make sense that what VDOT said to us. It didn't necessarily make sense for you to have two separate projects on the same street. So we were able to work that out with them as well, because then that changes the timeline and gives us the ability to not stress over one and not be thinking about the other. We could deal with them both at the same time.
Fontaine was my committee assignment, so one of the mice asking for more cookies that was probably me, so apologies for that.
No, that's fine.
Do we have a sense of why it went so high?
Well, I know that 750 is related to retaining wall improvements that exceeded VDOT's preferences. It was more local desire. Yes, I think we wanted some aesthetic look to the retaining wall that is not standard for them. And they said, well, you pay for it.
All right, Rory, you're on the road.
This might be my last one, maybe. Neighborhood transportation improvements. I understand that to be like our quick build program,
Yeah.
which it seems to me has been actually quite highly successful since we hired a transportation planner and safe route to school, and we're kind of forced to by the lack of bus drivers. Are we feeling that is all we can spend there? Because I'm starting to get the sense from that program that it could do more with more money, and if we're backlogged and everything else, maybe let's put some more into there.
That's a good question.
We'll have to look into that.
Do you have an answer for that one?
Not a specific answer to that one. It's a good question. Ben and I are actually, Ben said sure.
Ben's in trouble. That's not the answer.
Yeah. Seems to me when your transportation planner's wife is getting hit by a car in a crosswalk, you should give the transportation planner freer reign to do what needs to be done.
Okay, sir.
Ben's available to join.
Yeah, let's let Ben join them.
And as he's noting that, this is what I was going to say, but we actually, most of the work that you've been seeing so far has been spending actually out of the Safe Routes to School fund. That's for the focus, that's paying for the East High sidewalk, but a lot of the quick build work that we've done has been paid for out of Safe Routes to School to date. Which suggests to me at least that while we hopefully are going to get to a point where we need more money in this account, maybe not yet.
Okay. And that's federal funds? Have we been accumulating
No,
this?
Safe Routes to School was money that we allocated. That was
So that was the one-time allocation.
that was a one time because it was $500,000.
So are we waiting for Ben, or are you?
Did you need Ben, or was that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you all need me. Everyone actually kind of said what I would already have said, but yeah, it's correct. We are currently spending out of Safe Routes to School funds for the neighborhood transportation improvements. Once we run out of those funds, we'll switch to using these funds for the same sorts of improvements.
And do you have a sense of how much you can scale your work? Like,
Well,
how
to give you a sense of the spend down on how the Safe Routes to School projects are going, last year we did about 80 projects, and we spent $100,000 out of the $500,000 that was apportioned to us. We have about 160 projects on our list this year. I don't know that we'll get through all of them just because of manpower constraints. I would expect that we'd probably be able to spend another 100,000, given that we spent some of the funding on the East High sidewalk, and that was a little bit more expensive than what we usually spend for a neighborhood transportation improvement project. Usually they're more, paint and bollards kind of projects. When we start talking about concrete as a neighborhood transportation improvement, it gets a little bit more expensive. So if we're leaning on that fund for concrete projects, we may run into some more funding needs. But if we're sticking with paint and bollards kind of projects, which is the intent of this line item, then I don't know that we would be able to spend that fast enough.
So, yeah, to add on to that, again, the point is the quick build projects are supposed to be cheap, right? A, and B, we do eventually run into the same kind of labor constraints. We're relying a lot on our public service division, other people within the city to do the implementation of this project. But, as you noted, we've done a lot to date focused on the schools. I think, give us more time to continue to build that out. Thank you. And we'll talk about it again.
Again, next year.
Hey, next year. We talk about this every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal of quick builds is to be quick and cheap and then to be hardened when they're successful, right?
Yeah.
And I'd love to see that start to take that next step.
Yep.
Yeah, we actually do have some projects programmed in our Safe Routes to School list that will be doing that hardening that you're talking about. We had some very successful projects last year that were Safe Routes to School projects that we put in as paint and bollards. And we're going to be looking to use some of that Safe Routes to School funding to harden some of those projects. And so we may use that Safe Routes to School funding a little bit faster than we're anticipating, and we'll need to start digging into the neighborhood transportation improvements funding so that we can continue doing the paint and bollards tactical projects.
Great. Sorry, I have one more on this.
Please.
So I have been hearing from our city manager that there are a lot of ADA needs that we're currently identifying and will be coming up and will likely be a big spend. I'm not really seeing that in this CIP. Is the idea that we're not going to plan for it now until the transition plan is done and then add a big number in there?
Well, I wouldn't say that we're not planning for it now, because we have money set aside as you're describing. These are funds that also can go to that. New sidewalks can also be responsive to the ADA transition plan.
Sure.
What I would say to you is, at this moment, I have not prioritized dropping in any big buckets of money at this time until we get that report, until we get that document and see what it really says and what it prioritizes for us. I am optimistic that this version of it is probably going to be more direct and in your face than the last version that we had, meaning that it's going to sound a bigger alarm and tell us we have to get some things done. And I think we just have to prioritize at that moment and get to work. So I understand what you're saying, that we could put some money in now, but I think we're not that far away from actually getting the report and being able to truly put in the right amount of money for what we can accomplish.
Yep, that makes sense. I'm done.
As is tradition, SIA immediate implementation, increasingly non-immediate. Been some time since we did the SIA.
Yes.
What is it? What is the money for? And can we program that not tied to the SIA?
Yes, yes, and yes. So the SIA implementation is really, it's a specific earmark for the strategic investment area, which was a specialized small area plan. It came with its own implementation dollars after the fact. Some funds have been used, not much. There have been internal conversations that I've been a part of where I questioned, why are we letting this money just continue to sit if we're not going to prioritize projects that says implementation? That means we should be doing something. I've also had conversation with James about the idea that as we begin to do more small area plans, which we have earmarked for money to be available for, how do we then implement for those? We don't have a separate implementation plan set up for them. So one of the desires is to actually consider revising that and making it a SAP and implementation bucket. So then it's available for any small area plan that we have on the shelf, not really on the shelf because we don't like to put plans on the shelf, but any active SAP that we have, we would then be able to pull from that bucket and begin to use it. That's going to take council action because it's been earmarked as SIA specific. So that's one of the things we're planning to reconcile.
just rename it to SIA Eventual Implementation in the meantime.
No, we're going to call it Small Area Plan Implementation. We're going to get it right. We're going to fix it.
You look like,
I just had a question on, I remember seeing a sidewalk priority list a while ago. Is that easy to find somewhere online?
I've seen a variety of lists, I believe, because I've asked that question myself. I get referred to the Streets That Work plan, which is where it came from, and then the Bike Ped Master Plan. So I'm not sure. Do you know of one?
Well,
That's considered a realistic current version?
Well, what I was going to say is that what Commissioner is probably referring to is last year we presented a prioritization process that we had been working with under state funding
Yeah.
to put together. And that has continued forward. I mean, if you're interested in more, Ben can talk about that. I don't know, Stephen, if you have anything on that.
Oh, I agree. I think there's multiple lists. The question is, which is the accurate list? You know, which is the reliable list? And Mr. Sanders has asked that I take the lead on working with the main people involved in the list and really identifying what projects are we talking about and how we prioritize it in the cost instead of just having general projects out there in the list. So that's a task that is on my work plan.
Is there a kind of timeline to make a final list we can start to use our sidewalk funds on? And
Well, yeah, we'll be completing it definitely for the FY26 budget, though. Right now, we're getting through the FY25 budget, and the whole CIP in itself will revamp. But we'll have the list, and if there are priorities, obviously, if there's some priorities on there that we already have funding available, we'll start that. But I think this list will give us a holistic approach of the true costs moving forward. So the list itself, we're hopefully it'll be done within 3 or 4 months, but the funding of the plan will. There's a lot of moving parts. We got the transition. We got a lot of other projects going on.
I'll say that part of the concern that I have, and I'm right there with you because I know exactly what you're feeling in that we should be able to say what projects we're working on and which ones we're going to get done this fiscal year, which ones we're going to get done next fiscal year. So that's been a source of frustration for me as well. I think part of what I've been questioning Stephen on as he has been the technician that's gone into the shop because I had oversight of the shop and I was trying to figure out everything, but he knows more than me. I can acknowledge that. So part of what we need to figure out though is how many of these lists do we really have? And then we're going to probably have to do some prioritization ourselves, which then means that we're going to anger some members of our public who then see that we're working a different list than they think we should be working. Because I've heard about Streets That Work, that's the order that we should be putting things in the ground. And then I've had others tell me, no, it's the Bike Master Plan that you should be working. And they are not the same. I went and confirmed that for myself. So that's a problem. But one of the things that I feel like I am willing to own is when he brings me the list, then I will finalize what that list will be. And then we will publish that list, and then everyone gets a new expectation.
perfect.
And that's the list coming out of that whole OEP grant thing.
Well, I mean, that was the intent, was that we had access to this new system that we were going to be able to score. And one of the positives for me was that we had the ability to then determine how do you add an equity component to it, since we have that as our overarching priority. That work still has to be concluded. So that is what we're referring to, is what the next few months are going to require us to do to finish. I'll say to you that I'm going to make some people mad, but by the end of this fiscal year, there will be a list published on the website that says what our priorities are. How about that?
Sounds good.
I'll make that a new work plan item for myself.
Thank you.
And it may be a short list, and that'll be what we will prioritize, and then we'll add to that going forward. But I think we should be able to try to accomplish that sooner rather than later.
All right. We can move on to Parks and Rec.
All right, so there are multiple things here. Most of these were in the CIP last year. 2 new items. You'll see the Dogwood Vietnam Memorial. That foundation was awarded some state grant dollars that are basically passed through from the city to the foundation. And you'll note that there's a $600,000 revenue item for that as well. And then the lower Meadow Creek Trail, which is from Holmes to Locust Avenue, is an additional add here as well. Any specific
Yeah, a
questions?
couple of questions. One, I represent us on the Parks and Rec Board, so we are very happy that you're now fully funding the invasive species piece. So thank you for that. The one thing that's missing that gives us a little bit of heartburn are the refurbing of the restrooms. We've got in Tunstler, McIntyre Park, Washington Park, Belmont, and Forest. The doors are coming off the hinges, and it's so bad that we have homeless folks staying there overnight. And we ask that we take another look at getting those fixed because it's a safety issue with homeless folks staying there at night. And it's just an eyesore and something that is a disincentive for folks walking the trails there. So we, being the advisory board, Parks and Rec, would ask that you guys consider funding that. Most of the work we think we can do. We've got some other vendors lined up to help us with it. So,
Okay, we can take a look at that.
Ms. Hemmel, can you walk me through the $2 million for golf courses?
Sure. So the irrigation system that is currently at the golf course is outside its useful life and needs to be replaced. So the plan here is that we have added this to the CIP. It will be a bondable project. However, there will be a line item in the golf fund budget that in which the revenues from the golf course will actually be paying that annual debt service through a transfer to the debt service fund. Does that answer your question?
It gets me closer.
Okay.
Would this be something that we could possibly push back? $2 million is a significant spend.
It's
I think if you ask the folks at the golf course, they would say we've pushed it back to the point where it's almost not functioning. But we can certainly follow up and provide you some more information on that. I don't have the specifics to answer that question.
We get a lot of feedback on this, and this is something that the public has been asking for. So I would push really hard not to take that money away.
Yeah, I would add that from the time that Parks and Rec was in my portfolio as a deputy, that we talked about this and worked on what the right schedule was, and this was really the probably the end of the line for what we thought was appropriate.
It's my understanding that it's basically a loan almost that they pay
Right.
back for.
They
So
pay it back.
if we take that $2 million, it doesn't free up $2 million for anything else.
It doesn't free up $2 million for anything else. That's correct.
And I would also just like to bring attention to the Dogwood item. Chrissy mentioned that the $600,000 is there. This is money that Senator Deeds was successful in getting through the General Assembly. So those funds are to be received by the city, and then we will hold them. They will be a CIP item that will continue to appear. That $600K will be there. The foundation will continue to do its fundraising work, and they will make a determination on whether or not they will manage their pot of money or add to this. And eventually, this is to build the crossing over the parkway and the parking lot. And we're a tri-party member to this agreement. So that's the way that the senator put in the request, and the state awarded it so that we are the recipient of it on their behalf.
And just so you know, I think you may have mentioned it, the whole thing is going to cost about $1 million. But it looks like the veterans think that they can go out and raise the balance to get the $1 million to do the project. So it doesn't look like they're going to be coming back to us asking for additional money above and beyond that.
And $1 million is generous. It's going to be a lot more than that.
This is like a pedestrian bridge over because they don't have to use the crossing.
Yes.
Okay. It's not our money.
Great. That's right. We're just the holders.
A bunch of random questions. I don't know why it's Parks and Rec has got me asking all these now, but like urban tree planting. So we have 100,000 for each year. Do we know like how many trees does that get us?
200.
200?
I think that's
Yeah,
what the.
I had 175 in my head too.
Maybe it is
174
175.
in the latest.
Yeah.
RFP.
Okay.
I also put in, I think it's still there. My colleague Brian Ray designed a program. I think it's on the Parks and Rec webpage that will give you more information about the tree planting specifically.
And the invasive plant removal, what does 75,000 get us? Is that like an acre? Is that
I'm gonna defer to
I can't remember. My laptop ran out of battery, but if I'm trying to remember my notes from last meeting. We reclaimed about 12 acres or so this year
okay?
through that.
Cool. And I guess the ash tree removal, like, do we know how many trees there are out in the city that are going to eventually need a?
I can't answer that one.
Okay.
I would venture to say that we probably do know how many, because this has been a long-standing concern. And then we're prioritizing how many to take based on what the fear is of them failing.
I mean, yeah, this isn't me questioning any of these numbers. It's more just I'm curious.
Sure. But I do think, to your point, I think what you're speaking to is part of what I've been expressing to the team overall. These are questions that we should have answers for you already pre-planned in our head and put on our webpage for you to be able to see, and that's what we're going to get to being able to do.
I think I asked this last year, and I don't remember, but like, you would think at some point the ash tree removal thing ends because all the ash trees are dead and we have to remove them, right? But as I recall, there were also like, we were treating some ash trees to save them, right?
That's right.
And is that out of the operational budget? So it's not part of this line item?
There is, that's a good question.
Yeah,
So there is a horticulture
Yeah, there's two. It's-
line item.
Specifically for the
We need
hazardous
to,
removal.
Yeah, okay.
we can find that out. That's a
Yeah.
good question.
Yeah, my understanding is you have to. It's a continuous treatment.
Yeah.
Like an
Mhm.
ongoing.
Okay.
I think it is, but I'm not sure.
But I guess to Rory's question, this 100,000 eventually is going to go away. Like, we'll complete the job, or I don't know.
That's a good question. I think we need to ask that question specifically.
We'll follow up. So basically what we'll do is all your questions, we'll compile them all in a document and we'll send it out. We'll send you written responses so that you'll have them before the January meeting.
And then on the trail stuff, I guess, is there a list of like future trail projects out there? Because these were both new to me. I mean, they're exciting. I always wonder why, like for the Lower Meadow Creek one, why we do stone dust instead of paved, where it might be more useful for transportation, just like pavement, asphalt. So it could be useful for transportation as well as recreation. And I guess I don't know.
That was the answer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
one.
fair. Is there a process by which we make all these projects, or they just come out of Chris Jensick's head and get
Well,
the CIP?
Chris
or-
typically presents it to, they debate internally, then they present it to us, and then we kind of help them prioritize it.
Got
But
it.
at the end of the day, we are only an advisory board, so we only help them prioritize it.
Right.
Right.
They
Okay.
tend to not in agreement.
And if you go on the website now, you can find the major project status of the trails. It is a very lovely color-coded map. Very thankful for Chris Jensick for producing this for his new co-pilot, being me, that needs visuals. But part of, I think, the continuous addition also sometimes of the trails is that sometimes to put trail ending A with trailhead B, we need to buy that sliver of land. And I know that there's one in particular that the purchase of the land has taken quite a bit of time. So you will see these new asks, and if you notice, they're proposed 1 year in the CIP often. It is sometimes because we have finally been able to procure that portion of land to be able to connect the trails for their usefulness. His ultimate goal would be to connect as many trails to provide those. I'm from a community that calls them greenways. In the city of Roanoke, you can walk from the city of Roanoke to the city of Salem on a greenway safely. So you'll be able to see on that, it's, if you go on the website, it is on the right-hand sidebar, but he has where you will be able to see active developing and proposed trails. So that also will give you all some concept of what may be coming down the pike, either once the particular part of land is able to be acquired, or once we have the capacity to continue moving forward in that goal. But his ultimate goal is that we will have trails that will be safe for a 12-year-old to make it to their friend's house or to school, safe for one of our residents who may have some differing abilities to be able to traverse. He's got some great ideas, but Chris is trails and trails are Chris. We have one here.
Yeah, and these are all awesome projects, and I am sometimes amazed at how Chris manages to keep these trails getting built while we can't build any sidewalks. What's his secret?
I'm not sure if he sleeps. I'm going to be very honest.
We do get a lot of grant money, and we
Yes.
get a lot of state money to help us with that too.
We do.
And it is easier to do a trail than it is to do a street, I must say.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, it seems like we're zeroing out major capital spends on parks out of FY '25. And I think I heard something about a capital plan for parks happening soon.
We are working on a comprehensive plan for parks, and I think a lot of those zeros will be filled in, but we don't want to fill them in until we know what we want to do.
And there'll be probably different things.
Right.
I mean, from that planning process, we may actually be, that might be the end of these projects, and they'll be replaced by others as over the course of us figuring out what the next set of priorities should be.
And again, some of those have those zeros because, for example, once the YMCA portion of the trail is completed, it is done.
Yeah.
So there is no ongoing need for projected funding because it will be completed. Same with, for example, the Penn Park bathroom ADA renovation. Once that is completed, it's completed, and members of our community will have access to a restroom that is, it will be made for families. So if you are a male caregiver who needs to bring an adult male ward into the restroom while you're enjoying the park, you'll be able to do that.
On the topic of park bathrooms, what happened with the Riverview Park situation? I know it was super expensive, and
Yeah, it was a nightmare for me, but it was, I don't remember where it is. It's moving. Do you know? I know that it is moving. There was considerable issues with utility connection, water connection. That was the main objection for a while, but we got past that. We'll have to find out where it is. I haven't asked that question. Now you're going to bring it back up for me. I'll find out where it is, but I know that we had it on the list, that it was moving.
cool.
All right, looks like we are ready for affordable housing. This is going to be fun. Let's go.
I was gonna say, just let me jump in real quick on this topic. I'll be recusing myself because of the work that I do in my office that is tied to some of these projects on this list.
Oh, shoot.
Did you run that by legal?
They did not respond with like a formal statement I should make. So this is
I'm done. This is affordable housing is what we do. It concerns me that we'd have to exclude possibly 2 of our board members. I think should we, Mr. Flees, should we get a legal opinion on that? The worry is these guys are architects and they do a lot of work in the arena. And I worry that if we lose both of them, that we lose a lot of intellectual power. And they're suggesting that they may have to recuse themselves.
I don't know that I can speak to this, but I mean, are you speaking as generally as architects being concerned about working on one of these projects, or that you might?
Just doing like all of them.
Right. That's what I think Kareem is referring to.
I'm doing multiple ones on this.
Yeah, so that's appropriate. It's appropriate for what.
I am consulting now for that office and working on MACA. But I mean, we're not voting on anything tonight.
No, you're not.
No, we're not. But we're down the road.
Yeah.
And we will be voting in January.
But we'll have an answer for you for sure. But for now, I mean, you're not voting on anything. So if you're asking questions, it seems to be that you can ask questions.
And I lobby to get more architects.
Thanks, Kareem. I completely, not even considered that.
501, West Haven has been added. That was a request we heard loud and clear. Also, you'll notice that 501 Cherry has been added, and the funding for Phase 2 has been zeroed out as PHA has been able to secure other funding and has withdrawn its request for funding from the city for that phase.
So maybe you guys remember, but I don't remember Cherry. That's mixed income, right? It's not all affordable.
No.
All affordable.
All
It's gonna be all
affordable with the
affordable.
grocery
Wow.
store below.
Very cool.
Or proposed grocery store below.
Very cool.
So, I guess, and I probably say this every year, it's not that I don't want to fund 501 Cherry, but like, we have been trying to make more of a formal process for reviewing applications and kind of like prioritizing various requests against each other. And my understanding is that the request for applications for big LIHTC projects is still open, right? Even for this year's.
For this
And
year.
we only had a very abbreviated one for them for this last year before it was even 100% affordable. So, I guess. And you know, the affordable housing plan kind of calls for more of this stuff to go through like the CAF committee review. And when we're, you know, making these commitments, you know, years in advance without having like fully, you know, looked at these applications or, you know, seen them. I mean, you guys I'm sure have seen them internally, but we haven't seen them, or, you know, the public or council. It gives me a little bit heartburn because we lock ourselves into it, you know, before we really are able to weigh it against potentially other applications or, you know, other affordable housing priorities. So it's not really a question, but
Yeah,
are we going to change that process?
No,
or?
let me react to that. So they did apply. They applied through the capital investment process last year. That is the newly formed process that we really want to cement. So we now issue, and I mean, that's why he's here, but I'm just speaking to what I made happen before he got here, and then I'll let him add whatever details, right, Antoine? But ultimately, we formalized the NOFA so that we publish that in advance. There's a successive round of RFPs. One of the RFP rounds is a capital investment opportunity, no money allocated, so we're not making a commitment. Everyone applies, but what we intend for that to do is to inform the city of what are the sizable projects that may be LIHTC oriented. They don't have to be exclusively LIHTC, but they may very well be LIHTC oriented to more or less give us pre-notice that there could be a future ask. That is something that I felt like we did not have clarity on before. As I asked the question of the team, no one could tell me exactly where we were going. They just said that it's a matter of whenever their project is ready, they'll bring it to us, and then we'll consider an application and send it to the committee to consider. That didn't work for me. That did seem like we were planning as we should. So this 501 Cherry Avenue project was submitted last year. We didn't bring any of those projects forward last year. 501 Cherry at that moment wasn't ready. It wasn't ready enough. It wasn't baked enough, in my opinion, for us to have brought it forward. We consider it to be baked enough now, one, because you all approved what they worked on. So we took that as a sign. It's 100% affordable, so it checks the biggest box of the affordable housing plan. And we, of course, appreciated the model of the community engagement approach that they used, in that there was nothing controversial about the project. And because the conversation occurred with PHA about Friendship Court Phase 2 not being needed because they secured other funds, it seemed like a reasonable swap. Because it doesn't cost us anymore. It's just a reallocation, redistribution of the money that's already available. The intent going forward, and why the round that's open right now, that round that's open right now is not intended for this new fiscal year. Because of the timing. We can't get the timing right for a LIHTC application that's about to go in to fall in line with our budget cycle. So we're going to always now be a year behind. But that is, again, why I want to know as early as possible how many projects could possibly be coming so that I can talk to council about that in advance if I need to. The plan for how this round will close And we haven't had this conversation yet, so I'm breaking news
Okay,
with
well,
you.
let me get my pen up.
The intention is that I want to figure out, I haven't figured it out yet, so that's why he's going to figure it out, is that when we close this round, it would be my desire that council gets to see what that list is of what came in the form of requests as a notification to them of these are potential future assets you're going to get. They may or may not have a specific dollar amount attached to them, but I want to know as much as I possibly can because I have this 10-year, $10 million a year commitment that I'm trying to meet. And I want to be able to see how much of this can help me forecast our ability to meet that. And then how we do that is what he's going to have to figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, to that point, I mean, in prior years, what we've had almost every year is at least one mad scramble,
Correct.
and more often two, to get council to bless and, produce a memo of understanding or an intent to apply to tech. So I guess what you're telling us is that you're trying to stretch that so that we've got plenty of lead time and I guess, I mean, is it 1 year slower? Well, not once we're rolling, it's continuous.
Right.
Right, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that the scrambling around is not a good way to make decisions.
Absolutely. The goal is to eliminate the scrambling. There should be no scramble for anybody. I think we would be asking for the updated information just so that we know. It's my desire that even an item that's in the CIP already should also update during that time period as well.
Right. So this 26 figures for the 501 share is a little notional at this point.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and it looks
As
like
anything as anything that appears for any
Right.
future year, because there could be a cost overrun or something like that. They need to
well, I saw that the distribution differed from what the Office of Community Solutions initially put forward
Mhm.
as to how they split it and exactly when. So I assume that there was some reasoning for that somewhere.
Yeah.
The numbers were actually revised by PHA.
Yeah,
Right.
we took it from them.
Okay.
So to be clear then on the new process, it's like the CAF committee will be just for the flexible money that goes into the CAF for like smaller dollar amount hop stuff.
1.5 line
Yep.
item.
And the big items get reviewed just internally, but with like some notification to council? Okay.
We
And
just have
they
to figure out
wind up in
what
the
that
CIP
is.
Yep, okay.
Well, yeah, and we'll have to figure out what that is because that in itself is going to inform what do we do with this now.
So
Yeah.
have we formally murdered the city policy on the LIHTC committee that's supposed to exist?
Is that policy one? What are you referring
No,
to?
I learned about this the hard way. There is a LIHTC committee.
I don't know that I've heard this.
Right, that is supposed to meet to consider LIHTC requests, and it grows out of NTS, and it's an advisory board. The way I learned about this is we needed, when I was on the hack, we needed it, somebody on the LIHTC side of things noted that we had said we had such a thing and wanted to know where that result was. And so that LIHTC review committee was created out of hack numbers in about 45 seconds, and then we sort of went through them.
Sure.
So the question is, there is on the books a formal policy. There's a LIHTC review committee to consist of 3 people. I can dig it up from, this was several
All right.
years.
I think, so I will say, has it been murdered? No.
No.
Because I
Should
didn't know it
be?
existed.
Yes, right.
Do I think it needs to be murdered? I don't know yet. I need to find that and read
Right.
that. But I think that's something for us to follow up on. That's what I'm getting at of what we've got to figure out. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, well,
But
I
some
learned
concept to
about
that
it.
effect is what we're looking
Yes,
for.
I learned about it 15 minutes before I became the chairman of it, and then we had to do the review, yes. So-
That was born out of the previous hack, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to look into it. I'm not familiar
I guess the question for you guys as you think about that is like, is there value in having a sort of separate committee and process, or should the CAF committee just kind of?
That may be what we come back with. I think
Yeah.
that's the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in effect, sometimes at least 2 of these projects end up in front of the CAF committee because they submit
There as well.
there
Yeah.
as well.
Makes sense.
So,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess also one note on something you said, like, I feel like just because we vote for zoning approval for something doesn't necessarily mean that it's, a good, funding opportunity, which is not to say that 501 Cherry is a bad funding opportunity, but like, if someone's saying we're going to do, 100 units at 10% of AMI and like there's going to be a grocery store and a trampoline park, like I'm going to be like, great, of course that should be legal to build. Then they come and ask for $1 million a unit. Well, I don't want to fund it, right? But like, those are two pretty separate
Understood.
questions. Yeah. One last question. In last year's round of applications, I think it was actually the only one from not PHA or CRHA, the Muse on Little High, the 11th Street apartments, they asked for $900,000 for rehabilitation, and I'm curious why that never
Happened.
made any progress. I mean, they did apply for LIHTC and were funded, so maybe they don't need the money anymore, but
This was a CAF application or the R5?
I think it was in the pile
It was
of
in that.
HOPS applications, and it wasn't a CAF. I don't think it was directly for CAF because it was too much. It
Or
was
do
in
you
the,
think it was LIHTC?
yeah.
You think it was in the LIHTC round?
It
that
was
they
in the
applied?
like for I don't
It was
I
not
don't
on-
entirely remember how I got all these documents, to be totally honest, but I uploaded like 8 of these applications to Civilpedia, and like they're all PHA. It's 501 Cherry, it's Mac, that's Park Street, and then it's this Muse and Little High.
MEW.
Muse and Little High never appeared in the CAF.
Yeah, it was not CAF. Yeah.
Okay.
I can send it to you. It's the application for funding interest.
Yeah, nor on the HOP side.
No, we can take a look. I mean, more than likely, that means it's if it was in the LIHTC, it's on that list of projects that were not moved forward, and that's a question that we need to talk to Mr. Ikefuna, who's on vacation, as to why it's there and not moved anywhere else.
Cool. I'll email that to you.
I have a math question.
Uh-oh.
I see 8.9 million.
Yes.
Is that 10? Is there a way that that's 10?
No, the commitment is not 10 million in the CIP.
Right.
Commitment is 10 million for the whole year composite for what the city does. The rental assistance program alone is over 2 million.
So we are meeting our commitment.
We are exceeding our number.
We've also got HOPS out of the operations
Right.
side and NITS and NATS.
And we don't also identify a staff component to that, which in the affordable housing plan, it is identified as a contributor to the 10 million. We've never really spent any time worrying about that because we know that we're exceeding.
I think the response to that was, let's not consider staff
Sure.
salaries. I think that was the general consensus.
I would have argued against that if I were
Right.
here at the time, but I'm
Right.
fine
Well,
with it.
everybody else did.
So,
it's fine.
and I did not spend time worrying about it because I think we know that we have a considerable staff allocation for housing because it's not just the Community Solutions Office that's dealing with it. And in my mind, that doesn't mean we're trying to exclude putting the money out on the street. 10 million itself can get out on the street.
And in
Or
the out
more.
years, especially looking at 28, 29, we think
Yeah.
we can still hit 10?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I do have a question on the, we're now pushing out 2 million a year on rental assistance, you said? on
I-
C- on
Yeah, I'm
CREX?
almost certain it's, yeah, a little over 2. Chrissy, do you know that number?
Yeah, it's I don't remember exactly, but it's
More than
2 million or a little less. That's for rental assistance. Also, the Charlottesville Affordable Housing grant that people can apply for. So it's also rent assistance for the elderly and disabled. It's in the general fund operating budget. And those are programs that are operated by the Commissioner of Revenue's office.
Okay, so to go back to CRHA's administrative, the SISRAP, we're at 900 year in, year out. And maybe this is a John Sales question. He has a certain limitation by HUD for how many vouchers he can manage. Is that correct?
For his program,
For his program?
yes,
But we're not married to that.
correct.
Yeah.
And they've also never been close to that limit. They've been.
Well, yeah, that was the original idea behind SISRAP in the first place, is that they've got this capacity authorized by HUD. Let's use it. Let's give them money to use it. And that was sort of that notional idea. But so the reason I'm asking is rent it and going down, and 900 was what we started with in 2018. So, and I think CRHA has managed to now spend all of it.
We're just getting close to doing that.
Right.
Prior years, we've had surplus, and we've been able to use that surplus. The accumulation of the surplus is actually what we authorized, that's what council approved, letting them make the acquisitions of the property on Montrose, Coleman, and Harris.
Harris, right. Which actually brings me to another question, which is they've got a NOAA program that they're playing with it, like that Montrose and some other opportunities. It looks like Office of Community Solutions was interested in having their own funding source on that originally.
I'm not familiar with.
I'm not sure what
That was on the original asks. I think Brenda Kelly put it forward.
For,
Is that,
For property acquisition.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
For 500,000.
yes.
yes, for 500,000. My question is, and it's not here, which is fine, but my question is, I mean, we should be all singing from the same hymnal there, right? I mean,
I mean, is that the sort of thing where you could just use contingency funds to do? I mean, certainly we've
It's what we've done.
seen that we can use
Yeah, I mean,
contingency
yeah.
funds to buy properties.
Yeah, the problem is you need to, I mean, you can't wait around for any elected official to make a decision about whether you're buying the property or not, because that's too long. You got to buy the property. So, I mean, I hate to use the term slush fund, but I'm going to use it. I mean, it might make sense to have something sitting there for that purpose.
The reality is if it were a line item in the CIP, which is what the request was for $500,000 a year to make it a recurring, it would be the same as if it were in the CIP contingency. It still has to be approved
Yeah,
because it's a property acquisition.
right.
And that's going to be a process no matter what.
Yeah.
The only way for it to be a simplified process is for us to have put the money into the hands of another external party.
Like,
That's where the extreme flexibility comes in.
that's like CRHA, for example. So that's why I was asking, I mean, should we
Yeah.
perhaps decide we want a NOAA program and that
Right.
CRHA is.
And I would say that's a consideration because he's sitting right there and he has reminded me repeatedly that he's looking for a program related to acquisition because we make multiple purchases last year.
Yeah.
It's on the list to do. And
And
that's
I-
the reason for not considering the acquisition being added into this next fiscal year is so that we still have time to figure that out.
I'm talking with CRHA on that
Yeah.
program, the programming of that too, because, yeah.
Yeah. But ideally, that is the intent, is that I will have a program that we can bring forward that council can consider approving. And how it works is still one of the mechanics that we have to work on.
Yeah, great.
So with Cistrep, we are back up to spending all that money on actual rental assistance?
Yes,
Because it
we
was like
are.
all the COVID vouchers that
Has he
we
got it?
accumulated.
I know we're
He's
close.
close. He's not there yet. I
Okay.
think previously they were averaging 72, somewhere around that number. But he is getting closer.
Okay.
One thing to remember about SysRep, and John and I have had this conversation, is that there is, while it's appreciated that it exists and that we have used it, there's always a looming threat because that's $900,000 that appears in a 5-year CIP, and we're putting people into housing, and they're not going to be in that housing for just 5 years. So there's that reconciliation of the notion that without this commitment that we can say that this is going to be a part of our CIP forever, there was somewhat of a reluctance to overuse it and put people in a situation where they're already vulnerable, and then in 5 years, the program is ending, and now we've created.
Yeah, when we originally put that together, there was a lot of math on how to put together at least on paper, a sufficient off-ramp for everybody. And at the time, that made sense. I will tell you, the way the funding formula worked was one of those things that we all sat around the table and talked about it, and everyone understood it for about 15 seconds, and everyone wrote furiously to make sure it worked. I don't think that works in the current environment because there's just no air at all in the rental market. You can't say, hey, you got 4 months to find a new place. Like, you might as well give me 4 years to find a new place. I ain't finding a new place.
Yeah. The reality is that also speaks to why we probably should not stress over trying to spend the $900K. We should probably spend less intentionally and let that balance roll over just so that we have it
Just
to
in
help
case.
in those moments.
So something we've talked about for a few years is bondable versus non-bondable in affordable housing. And it's been sort of an operational challenge because most of what we do in affordable housing is not bondable, so we're not using that amazing interest rate. Not as relevant these days since we're a little bit tapped out on bonding, but it'll come back. We'll get back there. My understanding is that in property transactions, that could be bondable. Though I understand there are operational challenges to making that happen. So we've always gone through PHA to make that happen. Is it possible maybe it's this idea of a direct funding, the slush fund idea? Is that a way that we could use our bonding ability to solve affordable housing problems?
We wouldn't pass bond proceeds that way. I guess that would be the challenge. We have to be in the project to bond it.
Frankly, I mean, it doesn't have to be a large amount of money. It just needs to, that if the frog has to jump real quick, it's there so you can jump
Right.
relatively quickly.
The example is the Dogwood portfolio. We purchased that with CRHA. We didn't give them the money to purchase it like we did with Coleman, Montrose, and Harris. But in those transactions, we did request half interest in those properties. But the Dogwood portfolio is co-owned by the city. So if we find opportunities where we can be a co-owned relationship, then that's where we would be able to take a look at, is there a bond approach that we should take?
So that,
Let me point out that a land bank would have the authority to bond its own stuff and wouldn't be,
Which is why we're open to having that conversation.
well, let's have it.
so that constraint is true even if it's CRHA doing the purchase, because we can bond the general funds we give to CRHA, like West Haven, right?
Yes.
But
So
for
the
property,
the general rule by city charter and also IRS tax legislation is we are able to provide funds and sell by the use of bonds for governmental type agencies. So CRHA is considered a governmental agency, whereas PHA is not a governmental agency. They are a 501c3 nonprofit. So generally, that's why we are cash funding Friendship Court or Kindlewood as opposed to CRHA projects where as Sam noted, we're either maintaining some form of ownership or CRHA as a governmental agency is providing, will be maintaining the ownership.
gotcha. Okay.
So it just gives us, that filter that we need to try to consider. And that's something that we could probably begin to better plan for. So it's a big question that we have to answer.
All right. I think we're ready for technology infrastructure.
So this one is a pretty small category. The communications technology account, that is for our public access studio. It's basically funded by what are called public ed fees. I think it's public education grant. I'm not sure what the G stands for, honestly. But it is paid through everyone's cable bill, and those funds must be used for public access, and so we dedicate those funds to our Channel 10 studio.
We lost you. Give us a minute. We lost you. Give us a minute.
Do we need more PPG fees?
I don't know if she hears that.
Yeah, she stopped talking. I mean, we can hear it. It's very faint.
Can you hear us, Chris?
I can hear you.
All right, we can hear you. You're back. No, we just
we
lost
lost
you
you
for
for
a
a
second.
Oh, sorry. So did you hear all the stuff about the PEG fees?
Yep.
Okay. The citywide IT strategic infrastructure, that was an account we put in place several years ago. It was basically put in place because as technology opportunities represented themselves, smaller departmental budgets did not have an opportunity to monopolize on those. And so this was meant to be a pot of funds where we could take advantage of that. In more recent years, especially this came in handy during COVID, when we had to go to a fully remote posture, we used some money for that, and also we had gotten behind on some of our computer replacement and other things. So we've used the funds for things such as that. The voting equipment replacement, that is a state requirement. I believe it's every 7 years, and we are due for the replacement in 27. And so those funds are added as sort of a three over the next 3 years to get us to the anticipated purchase price. And then the circuit court case management system, this will be an upgrade to that system, and that is the projected cost of that program.
Right. Is that an internal thing, or is that public facing, like looking up court cases?
I think it's both, but we'll find out for sure.
Okay, no worries. Just that there are probably going to be some circuit court cases I'll be eagerly following soon. So.
All right, let's roll on to revenues.
So again, we've talked about the revenues, the fact that the revenues need to match the expenditures. So you see that in this, for 25, we are proposing a little over $21 million in bonds, a little more than $7.6 million in general fund dollars. And then the schools are also contributing some money. Some of these gain share funds were dollars that they had put forth as part of the plan to help pay for the additional add-ons to get us to the $90 million for the Buford project. In addition, because we did not spend the cash dollars in 21 that we set aside for COVID, they were put back in the CIP contingency. And so we've been drawing those down to help balance the CIP. And so you'll see that in several years. This current year in 24, we drew down a larger amount, and that was primarily for the Buford School project as well. And so all that to say that over the next 5 years in this plan, we plan to spend about $85 million in bonds and a little over $41 million in cash from the general fund. 2.8 in year-end surplus. The schools will be providing about 5.5 million in transfers from their year-end surpluses and gain shares. And then there's about 3.7 million, the largest part of that being Stribling at 2.9.
All right, that's good. What's new? Oh, wait a minute. You got something? Oh.
So just, and it's not quite idle curiosity, do we have any sense of the cost of funds on this round of bonds as compared to prior years?
So in 23, the bonds we just sold in the spring, we were a little over 3%. In prior years, we were around 1%. So those interest rates have continued to climb. I don't know what the current bond market is looking like, but I can, again, we can add that to your responses as well. I would anticipate it's probably somewhere between 4 and 5%.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Sure.
All right. Well, we got one more.
So I think you mentioned earlier that conventionally we have a cap on how much general fund money we move to the CIP to kind of keep it running. This is a very special year where we're a little bit tighter than normal. Would this be a year to consider being a little bit looser with that transfer?
Looser meaning?
More money.
To the CIP?
Yes.
Well, I think our goal is to honor the policy that we have in place. That would require discipline. That's the word that I like to use. So that will be what I ultimately will propose. I can tell you that now. That when we have that number and we present that to council, then that would be the request that I would make, is that we would make the transfer. That is the right thing to do because that's the policy that we studied, developed, and set on. And then you take the actions from there to spend the money. It doesn't mean you can't spend it. It just means you use it that way first.
Seems to me it's the fiscally responsible thing to do.
Is 3% of the general fund that goes to cash. That is the minimum. If you look at our 3% policy along with our year-end surpluses that we transfer in, we're actually averaging closer to 5% of cash to the CIP.
If we were a little more aggressive about the transfer, what would be the impact on our bond rating?
Rating agencies love cash projects, cash funded projects. Obviously it lowers your your debt load. And so they love, the more you can pay for cash, the better. They love our year-end policy, and our 3% policy. So, I would say if we did more cash, you'd get nothing but, more check marks in the right columns.
But I mean, a 3-to-1 ratio is pretty damn good for this year.
Kind of a small issue, but I think the mall vendor fees have been budgeted at 78,000. I think every year since I've been here. I understand that we have a lot fewer mall vendors than we used to, and now Raquel's opening a restaurant, so even fewer. Are we still actually getting 78,000? Are we raising our fees or something? Or
The mall vendor fee, I believe, isn't just about vendors. That's about cafe spaces.
Space,
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
that's cafe spaces revenue.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
Righty, the hour is getting late, so let's move on to what's new.
So again, this is just meant to be a list for you all to glance at. This is just a list of all the new projects that were added to this 5-year plan over last year. So this slide and the next slide itemizes those.
We've already seen these.
Yep.
Okay.
Maybe a stupid question, but do we really think that West Haven's only going to be 15 million?
No, so that's the amount that we felt that they would ask the city to contribute.
Okay, sorry.
$40 million is the number that has started to float, but it's going to be more than
And
that.
the they is, who is the they?
Sierra James.
And the rest
$40 million outside of LITAC? Like,
Potentially, yeah.
with philanthropy?
It's probably a $100 million project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
There's still, they haven't designed it, so there's still
Yeah.
so much more. That's the reason why there's multiple iterations of what it could be. But the 15 was the number that I had the conversation with John about. What is it that you're likely to ask us for? And council, of course, gave us the mandate to go figure it out. So
All right. Under consideration, still under consideration.
So I'll take that one just to save Chrissy. She's talked a lot. The challenge, of course, with budgeting is balancing. And when there's many priorities, that means balancing is a really hard task. You all know that homelessness has been a interesting topic for me this past few months. So there is a desire to figure out more that we might be able to do in this space. So that has not been factored into the CIP proposal at this time. Walker has not been, as well as what I mentioned to you previously, that we're not sure. So that's a conversation that council and school board will need to have. They are planning to have an earlier conversation this budget round. We anticipate that that is part of what it's for, but with other issues that have now popped up at the high school, then we know that there are other things that is going to also be a part of that priority. So we'll have to figure out where Walker falls, and ultimately it's where it falls, not if it falls, it's just when. That's really probably the question. Additional climate action initiatives, because there's just a question, as you identified in your question before, what does that mean, climate action initiatives? The specificity behind that is what I'm seeking, and that is a conversation that we have scheduled. So Crystal will come to meet with the budget team in the next couple of weeks, and we will spend a little time specifically on climate action as a topic. And the goal will be to look at the funds that they have been allocated, what has happened with those funds, what is likely to be expended before this fiscal year is up, and then to confirm that that $1 million is the right number. It could be that through this conversation, we cut back on a little bit and use that in other places, or we may increase later for there's another few things that may come down the pike. It's just not going to happen now. It'll happen later. There's a number of matters that have to be reconciled with our internal staff because a number of the initiatives are about our internal improvements that we need to make on some of our buildings. The question is, do we have the capacity, as we've discussed, capacity is an ongoing concern. Can we deliver those items on the proposed schedule of the $1 million each year? So there's some movement there. So I'm saying that to you to not be surprised that if the $5 million is still there, it may not be $1 million a year. It could be different. It just depends on what information we get from that conversation. And then we have the regional projects. These are parts of the conversations that I'm in, and or as an example of ECC, Ashley is the representative for me in that conversation. But the ECC has proposed, that's the Emergency Communication Center. They have a need for a facility because they're currently on UVA facility that they need back. So there's a desire for us to help them figure that out. That's a multi-jurisdictional matter, so we'll have to work with the county and UVA on that. And then the central library renovation is also a shared relationship with the county. The city, by all accounts of council, has indicated that we're ready to support a renovation of the main library. But of course, we can't do anything all by ourselves. We need the county to make the decision that they're going to join us in that work. That effort has been initiated. I've met with my counterpart in the county, and he's now having that conversation internally. David at the library has made it known to all of us what needs they have. I actually went and did my own tour just recently so I could see what was happening in the library facility. It has more than a library function today because it does also support our homeless population. So it's important for us to think about how we support them for what they're doing beyond their scope. So there's more conversation to be had in that space as well.
One question on that. The letter we got from JMRL indicated that the total cost was $15 million.
Mm-hmm.
That makes our share $7.5.
Right.
But also said there would be extensive fundraising from Friends of the Library.
Yes.
Is that in addition to that total? Like, is that total cost just the cost less fundraising?
I think there's anticipation that we may not cover it all. So that's their indication that if you pony up, then we're willing to pony up too.
Gotcha.
We just need you to come higher than a third is what that, I think that's what it means.
Okay.
So, selfish question: Do we lease or do we purchase the automobiles that the police department uses or that public works uses?
Today we purchase.
We purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Any chance we can get a couple automobiles for NTS?
I heard about that, but I don't remember hearing about that from the
I
planning
noticed
director.
it's here, but it didn't translate into here.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that one of the issues that we do have in Fleet, and Mr. Hicks is working on this too, is we have a huge backlog on Fleet right now. The strike did not help, but we had some issues before that. We have a vacancy in that position. It is my desire that we're going to have someone join us who has converted a fleet before, and also will come and answer questions differently than I've gotten answers in the past.
So what is the reason that we purchase as opposed to lease?
I think, well, I mean, a lease versus purchase. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say that's we would consider that an operating request, not capital.
Even though it's leased. Interesting. Okay. So it doesn't matter.
It's philosophical too. There's an aspect of that we also have to reconcile.
Okay. Cool.
I heard the zoning administrator's office has some nice new e-bikes they can use to get around for inspections.
Alrighty, what else?
Oh, I had a question. The library, would that be something hitting this fiscal year, or is that further out?
That's part of what the conversation is with the county, is to determine when. It probably will not be 25. I'm almost certain that it will not be 25 because I doubt that they are ready to step forward that quickly. It'll be a future year. And the conversation with David and that he's been having internally is that they understand that at this moment. They just want to know when so that they can plan for it too.
And the red carpet or the Premier Circle project, obviously that's under homelessness strategy, but it's a little more immediate. Is that potentially going to make it into the CIP or?
No, it won't be a CIP matter because it's already, technically the project is already funded. There's just a gap that has been identified over the fact that when they planned it to when they're going to break ground.
Yep.
I'm working through that right now, and that is going to be a different ask that I'll make of council directly, probably next month.
Okay, cool.
Well, January. Yeah. And that's to close the gap so that the project can start in May as planned.
Great.
Are you going to talk about those?
No. Chrissy, you want to talk about your CIP resources?
Sure. So just wanted to highlight that if you need any further information, it sounds like you all have already taken advantage, which makes me happy to hear you reference the Budget Explorer tool, also the online budget book. Right now, the story pages that you see there are basically for projects that are currently in the 5-year plan. It is a long-range goal that we would like to make that a working resource so that any active project would also have a story page. That will take a lot of work, but that is where we're headed. And then finally, as you all well know, if you need any information on the comprehensive plan, I've provided the link for that as well.
I just want to say this is amazing and leaps and bounds better than when I first got on the planning commission. So thanks for all the work.
Yep.
More to come.
What do you guys need from us to help you make January 10th a successful meeting?
Well, I think, well, and the next slide was the planning commission role. I think you're on it. So, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. I think ultimately the questions that you posed tonight were the kinds of questions that we anticipated. Those were the things that we were looking for. It gives us things that we can go back as a budget team to review, reconsider some choices that might have been made at this moment, as well as bring forward the clarity for some of the things that you all have asked about. We do, like I said, with climate action, we have a meeting scheduled. We're probably going to have a transit conversation as well before the year is up. That would also make a change to what is being presented to you today. So there will probably be a little bit of a tweak. Our goal would be that if we make any significant changes, that we will get a new version of this to you ahead of that public hearing. I don't want you to come into the public hearing and then think that, well, we did a bait and switch or anything like that. So the goal would be to inform you of any additional changes that are related to questions you posed today and or us getting the rest of the answers that we need.
If we've got questions or recommendations, we send them to Missy and James or you or...
Christy, would you rather they come to you?
I would defer to Missy. I'm happy for them to come to me. I don't want to interrupt their process, though.
Let's let Missy have them since that's the normal practice for you.
We'll just send them to the planning commission. Yeah. Planning commission list, okay.
And that way it's no different than what you're accustomed to doing.
Okay.
Tell me a little more about that transit conversation. Is that about more buses or the transportation plan, or is that like the fuel study? Or
no, it's not about the fuel study because that's an altogether different proposition because that requires a council decision. It's more of we know that there are investments that we need to make in transit, period, whether we were considering alternative fuels or not. Garland has been patiently waiting for me to say that it's his turn. So I'm prioritizing that this time around. Yep. We were pretty close last year. We were concerned about pushing too much through without having Buford more settled at the time because we went up until the last minute with Buford even. I think right now, for me, it's important that we figure out how to make some investments in just what we already have in transit because performance is one of our biggest concerns. Yep. And we need to try to do better regardless of what the fuel of the bus is.
Cool, I agree.
Cool.
Is there a way to get the unfunded requests in this format on this like Excel?
Really? Do you really need that?
That's a fair question.
I accept it as a fair question. Let us take that back and figure out, is there a way for us to get something to you that is meaningful? We've been reluctant to really spend time on that list because we know that our process needs work. So I don't want to give you a list of things and then you are considering those things because some of those things we know probably need more vetting before they should even be on the list for you to consider. That's probably the fairest answer I can give you.
That's one of the most political answers I've heard from you in a while.
Being honest. Being honest. It's not to say that we can't figure out a way to give you a list. So I think that's the question that I'm going to take is to figure out what is a way to present to you a list of items that are not in the CIP.
Yeah, or it could be items that we should consider that are unfunded. It's just an
Mhm.
avenue for us to.
Okay.
Kind of like restroom renovations, for example.
Sure. So I would consider that maybe a prioritization list of items that have not been yet funded, and maybe we can spend energy on that, because then that gives you something more tangible to consider when you look at it.
Yeah.
I'm in trouble now. Chrissy's she's mad at me right now.
Or I guess it's the new request list. That's different from unfunded.
Along with that,
I'm mad.
can we get? Is there a way to look at the unspent money? Like I'm looking at, I looked at the budget tool, and there's the underground utilities, 4.9 million. West Main Streetscapes had 8.6 million. I'm not sure where that money's going, or if it's allocated to something else already. But is there a way, which I know you're looking at, like which one of these line items is like, not going anywhere, and we can use that money for something
Yeah,
else?
I think that's the cleanup work that we've been talking about. We had hopes, I had dreams that Chrissy was going to have an additional person on her team. Emma is great, but I thought we were going to have 2 Emmas, and we would actually be able to get to that. Most of our energy has been trying to be focused on the transparency work that you all just complimented, and that's almost done. I think we can shift into doing more of what you're asking to where we'll have a better managed CIP, and it's no one's fault. It's just what we've been doing. I think there's some work that we need to do, and we just have to figure out when can we find the time to really do it. I've been talking about it since I got here. Absolutely. It's just one of those things that it's a lot of money sitting in the CIP, and I know for a fact that all of it is not truly allocated for a project to happen. There's some money in there with no purpose, and I don't like that. So I think that's part of what we're committed to trying to figure out.
And I would also add that, like the West Main Street streetscape, you know, those are just budget dollars that were offset by expected federal and state dollars that now are not going to materialize. And we have been working through this VDOT reconciliation. And at some point, there will be an action taken to council to kind of close those off the books. So I just caution you, like, as you look at these accounts on the Budget Explorer, just because there's an available budget, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can say, oh, we're not going to spend it on this, now we're going to spend it on this, because it depends on what the source of dollars were. So if it was a cash project, sure. But that all of that requires council action. It certainly would be in your purview to make a recommendation. But unfortunately, all dollars aren't necessarily dollars that can be spent if the revenue does not materialize.
I think that's the next layer of going deeper that we've got to figure out. That's what's going to lead to the ability to clean it all up.
Thanks.
Bill. It's showtime.
Well, since I was going to do this next month, but since you grinched us out of our December meeting, I'll do it now. So it's a bit of a Christmas story. On December 24th, 1971, a 17-year-old girl named Julianne Kopecky got on a plane in Lima, Peru, fly home to this little town in the Panguana area of Peru. She'd been born in Lima. She was a German citizen, had spent the last 4 years out there with her parents, who were scientists. And the German authorities were getting very upset with her not going to the German preparatory school, so she came back and took a bunch of tests to graduate from high school. Her mother wanted her to come back on the 20th, but she really wanted to go to the graduation ceremony on the 23rd. So on the 24th, she gets on the plane, and about 40 minutes into the flight, the plane fell apart, and bits and pieces of it fell into the Amazon jungle at a height of 11,000 feet. When the wreckage was eventually found on January 12th, several of the passengers were still strapped into the seats they fell in. Julianne wasn't there. The reason Julianne wasn't there is that when her chunk of plane smashed into the jungle, she unbuckled her seatbelt, bound up her broken right arm and collarbone, staunched the bleeding on her right eye, and spent 11 days walking through the jungle to downstream to eventually find a fisherman's camp, which was not occupied. She did some emergency first aid on herself, which included pouring gasoline that she found there onto a wound in her arm to kill the maggots. Then the fisherman came back to the camp and took her home. She's still alive today. She's a bat specialist. She's a mammalian biologist. She's a bat specialist. She's still in Peru. Why am I telling the story to the Planning Commission as we adjourn? I'm telling you that as the City Council looks at the zoning ordinance next month, that we should all be aware that after you get to a certain point, height doesn't matter. Let's adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. We are out.